Minutes.
Are we unmuted? Good evening, everybody. We'll be starting in about 2 minutes. Hello, I'm Doug Hoff, Treasurer and Secretary of the Peachtree Board of Directors. With me presenting this evening is Stephen Beckley, President of the Board, and our insurance broker of record, Ella Washington. This town hall is an informal meeting, so no decisions or actions will be taken. We expect to have the video recording of the meeting uploaded to YouTube by tomorrow morning. Please use the chat feature to submit questions, which we will begin answering at the end of Ella's presentation. The next meeting of the Board of Directors will be Wednesday evening at 6 p.m. at Council Tree Library. The meeting is also available on Zoom. Please arrive by 5:45 so we can start promptly at 6. Last summer, we became aware of media reports about the insurance crisis affecting HOAs in Colorado. On September 10th, 20 owners signed and submitted a letter to the board urging an updating review of Peachtree by Ella Washington Agency. The objective of this review was to begin identifying repairs needed to comply with the underwriting requirements of our insurance company, the Travelers. The review was completed by Robert Fulcomer in September. On October 7th, Ella provided a video recorded meeting for interested owners, updating us on the insurance situation for HOAs in Colorado and reviewing recommendations for required repairs for Peachtree to meet the changing insurance underwriting requirements. We will hear an update from Ella shortly, but the situation remains unchanged. We could face an increase in the cost of our insurance coverage by 300 to 1,000% if the Travelers does not renew our policy. The current monthly HOA dues for my dad's home is $483 a month, of which 152 goes to Peachtree's insurance. If the insurance costs triple, his monthly dues in 2026 will increase to $787 a month, a 62% increase, assuming no additional increases in other costs in the HOA budget. Ella will explain why this situation cannot be solved by individual owners purchasing insurance for their buildings. She will also discuss other insurance carriers she is evaluating for Peachtree. Unfortunately, the costs of repairs are not solely tied to insurance. We also need to address repairs related to public safety, building structural and environmental health, and the restoration of the value of our homes. Regarding the last point, the overall condition of the Peachtree negatively impacted the sale of at least 2 homes in 2024. Following Ella's presentation, we will show you the updated assessment of Peachtree conducted by the board with the support of several owners. As a relatively newcomer to Peachtree, I was disappointed by the many clearly visible conditions requiring repair. Later in the presentation, you will see that some owners have endured unsafe conditions for years. I was also saddened to learn that that suspected microbial growth or mold identified in several buildings last fall, and the action has by last fall, and that action has not been taken to address these concerns. We're fortunate no serious injuries have occurred. Ella will explain that today's litigious environment, a serious injury almost always leads to a lawsuit. When this happens to the HOA, it could become an consuming issue for years. Amanda Ashley, our attorney at Altitude Law, recently explained that the board has no discretion to ignore unsafe conditions or those creating financial liability or risk to Peachtree. So let's be clear. We're not here this evening to discuss whether repairs should be made or how to prioritize them over the coming years. Rather, our meeting tonight is a first step in identifying the repairs that must be made this spring and summer, projected costs, and the funding choices we have as owners. We're now going to turn this discussion over to Ella.
Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, thank you guys for involving me. Insurance in Colorado has been a challenge for the last several years. As you guys see on the news, California continues to struggle tremendously, and we will see those ripple effects here in Colorado. Unfortunately, Colorado is number 2 in the nation for wildfires, right behind California. So all eyes are going to be on Colorado this spring and this summer. As we continue to see these insurance restrictions, we see several more carriers pulling out of Colorado here in 2025. And why are insurance carriers pulling out? Because no HOA insurance carrier has profited in over a decade. No home carrier has profited in over 8 years. These insurance carriers are for profit. If they're not able to profit, they will make the tough decisions to non-renew and pull out. When insurance carriers pull out of Colorado, that puts a lot of pressure on the carriers that continue to do business here in Colorado. And the reason why it puts pressure on them is because now these carriers that are staying in Colorado have to make tough decisions on which risks they are going to add to their portfolio. So upon renewal, it's going to be crucial that insurance carriers do inspections, whether it's physically or by drones, to make sure that the risks that they are taking on and keeping in their portfolio are going to be profitable. As we see these restrictions come through, we also are dealing with insurance treaty restrictions. Insurance treaties are reinsurance carrier agreements that have contracts with insurance carriers. So in the simplest forms, these are the insurance companies that insure insurance companies. So when we do see these $50 billion horrible catastrophic fires in California, it's not going to bankrupt a lot of those insurance companies. Thank goodness they have reinsurance treaties stepping in to help pay for damages. What we will see in the upcoming future, and I've been predicting this for years because we do work nationally with other states like Florida, who are more problematic than Colorado. We are seeing the new insurance for associations and our larger homes are going to be a layered insurance policy. And this is exactly what we're trying to keep Peachtree away from right now. We will see that insurance companies will come in and say, we're happy to insure this HOA, but we will only take the first $5 million of risk. Another company will come in and take $2.5 million of risk. A third company will come in and do, $7 million in risk. So what they actually do is you will see in the near future that to build out a comprehensive HOA's insurance policy for the building, the liability, the directors and officer, and the crime fidelity, it could take 5 to 9 different insurance carriers to get involved to actually build out a comprehensive policy to protect your community. So important when you are working with insurance brokers. It's important to make sure that you are working with a true independent broker. My agency has access to over 230 different insurance carriers. There's independent brokers, and then there's captive agents. When I started my career 29 years ago with American Family, I was a captive agent. And what that meant was I was exclusive to only write American Family business. My relationship changed about 10 years ago with American Family. We just saw the market being extremely volatile, and it was in the best interest of my customers for me to be able to offer more products and more carriers. The broker works directly with the community and the board to make sure that the shopping is done correctly and accurately to be able to provide the most comprehensive policy at the most competitive pricing. And as we continue to navigate, regardless if we continue with Travelers or we find a different company, it's really important to pay attention to the educational letters that I do every year for Peachtree. HO6 policies are mandated. They are a requirement usually in the CCNRs. If it's not required in there, you still want to insure for the portions of your home that the HOA does not insure for. Furthermore, that HO6 policy does carry loss assessment coverage. Really important coverage in today's market because we have a 5% wind hail deductible. That loss assessment will cover any special assessment that's a covered insurance loss. So let me repeat that. Loss assessment is a special endorsement on your HO6 policy that could cover for a covered insurance loss, such as wind or hail. So as you guys continue to navigate through some of these repairs or deferred maintenance, if there is special assessments, it's important to know that the loss assessment coverage will not cover for special assessments due to deferred maintenance or any kind of special projects. It does have to be a covered insurance loss. When my office met with the previous board and some of the homeowners back in the fall, Robert Folkhammer, who is an 18-year HOA insurance adjuster expert, he physically walked the property. He went through and looked at the most common areas of weakness within the association that could pose a potential loss. Because we are both HOA insurance experts, Robert was also able to identify some areas that could potentially cause you guys to have a claim. Some of the stuff that I have been educating the board on is we want to make sure these areas are addressed. Why? Because we want to make sure Travelers continues the insurance policy. And the other reason is we want to make sure that there's no open lawsuits. What people don't realize is it can take several years for a lawsuit to get settled in today's court of law. And we have something that some of you guys may have heard of. It's called social inflation. The cost for attorneys, the cost for pain and suffering, the cost to go to the hospital. All of these are drastically inflated costs nowadays. So a simple broken arm or a broken hip has really turned into a costly expense, not only for the community, but also for the insurance company to defend. So as an association experiences something serious like a liability suit, we often see that the current insurance carrier will cancel or non-renew at renewal. The new insurance carrier will pick up, but it'll be unfortunately a very increased cost in premiums due to having an open claim. And again, we do see those claims open for quite a few years. In these pictures here, the one on the left with the railroad ties, not having some kind of a fence or a stoppable area, it could be a liability. I don't know much about building code. That's definitely not my forte, but I can tell you that children love to climb on areas, animals love to walk along those areas, and in the event of any kind of a snowstorm or an issue with visibility, somebody could easily stumble down there and fall and get injured. And so that's why the board has been educated, I think, through a couple different areas to consider putting a split rail fence along that area to help bring awareness that there is a 3-foot drop. In these pictures, these all appear to be drainage issues and heaving of concrete. We want to make sure that any kind of heaving of concrete is easily addressed. I know it can be expensive. Yes.
Sorry, I accidentally hit two slides. So we're talking. I think next is for trip hazards is the stairs at our 4 stacked unit buildings,
Yes.
5 stacked unit buildings. So
yes.
sorry.
Okay, good. That's okay. Thank you. So, yep, the stairs are definitely a trip hazard. We've seen this with several associations in Colorado, where the open area, I mean, it just becomes a slip hazard. We've seen kids get their legs stuck before. We've seen animals get their legs stuck before. It's just an area of concern. I know the board has mentioned the area of concern. Again, I'm not your expert when it comes to contracting, but I definitely am your expert when it comes to liability concerns for the association. These will be areas that the HOA insurance inspectors look at. I see some deterioration of underneath the stairs there. That could be a structural concern. So again, really important to make sure that we can eliminate any kind of trip and falls. And then back to the concrete. Concrete, yeah, can be tricky. That heaving of concrete, we don't look down a lot when we're walking. It does grab our toes and our shoes in the front. And we have seen people face plant, causing damage to their face, causing hip injuries. Unfortunately, again, concrete's not an easy fix. It is costly, but it's also probably the number one trip and fall hazard concerns for associations and apartment complexes. Down in the lower right hand is a picture of drainage. Again, making sure that water runoff is drained properly for 2 reasons. One, it's part of the reason why the concrete is probably shifting, and 2, ice damming that builds up in the winter time. And the shrubs and trees will continue to be a concern in Colorado, again, with California having their unfortunate event. We're going to see a lot more restrictions coming in on our shrubs. These insurance companies are going to ask all of us, homeowners, HOAs, apartment complexes, anybody with structures, they're going to ask us to control the controllable. And that's going to be removing any kind of overhang and making sure there's a healthy clearance in between shrubs, trees, and the structures. And again, these are examples of what we find, really what the problem is, and what we've learned in the Marshall fires are, depending on the wind, we actually, insurance carriers now have access to something called ember flow charts. We can see how the wind blows. They can see how embers flow through the air. And some of those embers in the Marshall fires ended up 2 miles away in another town and ended up catching shrubs on fire, as well as decks, fencing, and that also got sucked in on the inside of houses, causing fires on the inside. So anything we can do to prevent and make sure the community is safe, because at the end of the day, insurance is a huge pain point, and I understand that from a financial cost. But some of these decisions could be life altering. We want to make sure that if there is a fire that breaks out nearby, you guys have done everything you can to mitigate your property to protect lives and your homeowners.
Ella, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Remind us if you know offhand, how long have you been our broker of record?
Yes, I took over in 2017.
Yeah. And we moved to we were with a different carrier, and we moved to the Travelers in 2019 or 18.
Yes, you guys were with American Family prior to that, and then yes, there was a change over to Travelers in the year, I think it was 2008. No, it was 2019.
And you plan to shop our coverage, even though you have now pretty good reason to expect the Travelers will renew if we meet their underwriting criteria, but you're still going to be doing some annually, your assessment of our insurance with other insurance companies.
Yeah, it's no longer safe for me to assume that any insurance company is going to offer my association a renewal. So we start shopping the insurance 120 days before the insurance renewal. Your policy does not renew until May. All of our applications are in underwriting. We wait and we sit in line. Again, we go wide, we go deep. We know what the majority of these insurance carriers' restrictions are. We keep track. We have a spreadsheet and we meet with these underwriters on a weekly basis. If we see any markets open up, we absolutely stand in line to be able to get those quotes. But right now, we have slim pickings, and this is exactly why I wanted to make sure that our renewal offer goes smoothly with Travelers. Travelers is one of our last admitted insurance carriers in Colorado that continue to insure HOAs.
Folks, feel free to type in a question in the text for Ella. Well, if you're doing that, that's great. But you just mentioned admitted carriers.
Yes.
What is an admitted carrier?
Great question. Admitted carriers are insurance carriers that are licensed to do business here in Colorado. These are our more affordable insurance companies. When the admitted carriers pull out and there's no more admitted options, this is where insurance agents and consumers have to go to surplus lines or excess lines. Of course, we want to keep you in the admitted space because it's much more affordable and it offers a lot more comprehensive coverage. What we're running into is a lot of the admitted carriers are highly restricting their coverage. A handful of them that are left will only insure up to $10 million for an association. The association cannot be more than 10 years old. And then they have very high restrictions on the quality of materials that the HOA can be built with. So here comes all those insurance red taping restrictions and trying to limit the amount of coverage that these insurance carriers want to take on in Colorado.
Well, thank you again for joining us this evening. Would love to have you stay if you can. And we're starting to see some questions. Can you see the chat and see that question, Ella?
Yes, let me go ahead and click on that real quick. All right, Connie and Donald said, is Colorado putting any restrictions on insurance that is causing underwriting issues? So Colorado has not yet. I do have concerns. I shared an insurance article with your board. The insurance article was I think it was ABC News released it. It said experts say Colorado is on the brink of an insurance crisis similar to California. What the comment was in the actual article was it was a first day of legislation that just started here in January. And the person that was interviewed said that Colorado is just two bad decisions away from creating a crisis similar to California. With that said, I am one of the larger HOA insurance agents in Colorado. My experience goes very deep with Department of Regulatory. I was on a legislative committee overseeing bills that were being proposed for HOAs and for homeowners. I sat on that committee for 8 years. I am working with several insurance carriers to make sure they have our lobbyists headed down to the Capitol to make sure, are we passing bills that are going to help support our communities? Are we making good decisions so that we're not in a situation like California? So I had 2 meetings last week. I have another one tomorrow, and I'm putting pressure and I'm challenging these CEOs of these insurance carriers. And again, it's a pleasure to be one of the larger insurance agents because my voice does echo. I do bring logic and experience to the table difficult for these CEOs, and they also have a vested interest. They want to pull profit. So together between legislation, my communities, and these CEOs, I want to make sure Colorado is doing business correctly.
We just got a text question from somebody who I think who's joined us by phone. I'm assuming that's the case. They wanted to know if we have any update on whether State Farm is still in the market and the turmoil that they've had in coming in and out of California recently. Do you have any update on where State Farm might be? I know that's not one of your carriers you have access to, but do you have any update?
State Farm has restrictions on how much coverage they can offer. Some of the concerns that we have seen with other communities, I was not the insurance agent. They did have me come in and do guest speaking on it was fire ignition resistant construction materials. I was doing an education. One of the concerns I have is some of these insurance carriers that are left, the agents aren't HOA experts. And so it was a $30 million complex, and the State Farm agent had offered a $19 million policy that said that it was a guaranteed building replacement. And when the homeowner asked, well, since it's guaranteed building replacement, why don't we just insure for $1 million, pay the premium for only $1 million in coverage, because you will guarantee up to 30 million, right? And the State Farm agent quickly, abruptly got out of the meeting and was no longer able to offer a quote. So we just want to make sure that when homeowners are working with insurance carriers, if it's too good to be true, then it probably is. We want to make sure that HOAs are being insured for a 100% replacement cost. There is language restriction in all of these policies. And the language says if you do not insure for 100% replacement cost at the time the policy is placed, the guaranteed building replacement cost is null and void. So we want to make sure that regardless whether it's State Farm, Farmers, Travelers, whatever carrier you work with, whatever HOA insurance expert you work with, you want to make sure business is being done correctly.
I'd add another one to the list, and that is we had a $1.4 million hail claim situation here in 2020, and it happened before that in 2014, and I think it happened in 2010-ish before I moved in 2012. And oh my gosh, the work that you helped with that claim was amazing. And that is, I could immediately appreciate your expertise and how much you care about your clients.
Thank you. I remember that claim, Steve, because when I was at that meeting, when you guys were voting on the special assessment, I remember somebody had miscalculated the cost per homeowner on that special assessment. And I remember running over to, I think it was on site at the time, asking who calculated, and they all pointed to Michael Krieger, the HOA attorney. And I ran over to Michael. I said, this amount is incorrect. How you guys need to fix this. So again, really important to make sure you have strong, experienced agent backing you through these hard times, because if you don't have the right guidance, we are seeing associations end up in quite the predicament.
Thank you again for staying with us if you can, Ella. And if somebody thinks of something as we proceed on, and don't hesitate to put it in the chat. So this slide speaks to what Doug has mentioned and others, that our property, the appearance of it is painful. When my wife and I were looking for HOAs to go back to HOA living, our realtor would drive us in to have an appointment and not let us get out of the car because he would see broken concrete. He would see vegetation that wasn't taken care of. He would see the pavement wasn't well maintained. And as we said at the beginning, we know there have been some sales recently that took a hit because of the appearance of the property. And some of these are just awful. The Cheyenne privet hedge being so terribly overgrown. This border in the right here is over here at Horsetooth, and this is all dead juniper. that's been there for a while. Our pavement was last treated in 2015 or 2017, excuse me. It's overdue, and when you delay that, you just create problems. Our pavement fellow who came in 2017 gave us an estimate for doing new crack sealing and helping with the garage drainage issue that we have at some of our stacked unit buildings. He said you're about to let this go too far, and then you're going to wind up not crack sealing, but a major pavement replacement. So we just really feel like that tonight we are sitting here not just looking at the things that are insurance related, but we cannot delay. We need to restore the value of our property. So what does that mean? We've done an assessment of the property with several owners who have put hours and hours into the work over the last 4 weeks. And in addition to insurance, you'll see in the coming slide, public safety issues, environmental health issues, structural repairs, and this broad category of value restoration. And vendors were incredibly generous in helping us to build estimates. These are not formal proposals. In some cases, we don't have enough known yet to get a cost, but we've tried to build together a high and low range on some things as best we could. But we've had a tremendous support and have spent a lot of time walking the property with these vendors. So again, tonight is not about whether we do this. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to act on the concerns, and we will. The question is, how do we fund it? And there are 4 sources of funds for us. Our operating funds, our reserve funds without replenishment. In other words, we would spend reserve monies, but not plan on having a special assessment to replenish that spend, or to surcharge our dues. And it could be a combination of those 4 things. As of right now, as of December 31st, we have $228,000 in our reserve account. And we had a surplus this year. I think it's over $30,000 that we did not spend. In other words, we took in more in income than we had in expenses. Ella, can you see the question that just popped in? Can you go ahead and please answer that? Ella, you're muted. Let me see if I can help there.
Perfect. Now it's working. Thank you. Great question, John. A lot of associations are asking this very question. Why can't we purchase liability policy for the entire property and then purchase our own insurance for our own property? So one, in order to dissolve the HOA's building coverage, it's going to involve the HOA attorney. I've seen this done with smaller 6-unit or less associations. I've not seen it done with a 70 homeowner, 70 homes. So with that said, legal is involved. I think majority of the vote would be necessary to pass that vote. But then once you get down that road, let's peel back layers. What does it look like right now in the home market? The home market is struggling just as much as the HOA market. Again, 8 years since a home insurance carrier has profited in Colorado. 2, now there becomes what I've seen, party wall agreement issues. So let's say a hailstorm does come through and we've got some homeowners replacing the roof, but others can't afford it. And why? Because now under a home policy, the homeowner is responsible to pay for that 5% wind hail deductible out of pocket. So if you're insuring these homes for upwards of $600,000, you're going to be coming out of pocket $35,000 just for a wind or a hail deductible to replace the roof. Some homeowners may not have that cash flow to be able to pay out of pocket. And why would they have to pay out of pocket? Because loss assessment is not the same on a home policy as it is on an HO6 policy. So then we see some homeowners don't replace roofs. We see water intrusion sneaking into neighbors' homes, causing drywall damage, causing rot, causing mold, and then it becomes a problem with being able to try and maintain the property values. So we've seen situations like this, and it does become challenging. Is it doable? Probably. I've not seen it successful again for anything over 6 units.
There's another
Um,
question for you,
yeah.
Ella.
Does full replacement coverage require an appraisal? No, it does not. So my job as an insurance expert, especially for our HOAs, getting to work with all these dozens upon dozens of different carriers, I watch every single claim closely. And why? Because I'm always looking at what it costs to rebuild. There's a different cost to rebuild from the ground up on a total loss. Much cheaper to rebuild from the ground up, as opposed to having a fire and having a partial loss. When we see those partial losses, we know price per square footage. It costs a lot more to rebuild those. We also have the challenge of ordinance and law codes constantly changing. So when there is a loss, we want to make sure that code kicks in and we have that additional coverage. So nope, we do not require an appraisal for that full replacement cost. It just requires a really good insurance agent to make sure you guys have adequate coverage.
So let's get into the first category of repairs, public safety / insurance. I think we got a really good bid for replacing 48 stair treads at the stacked unit building. When you do this in volume, you wind up with a much better cost. And the vendor that we chose to work with was a certified Blue Sky restorations vendor, inside out home remodeling, has really strong references, and he meets the requirements for being a vendor under Blue Sky, which is really stringent. And so Victor Johnson spent a lot of time on our property, and he can do a lot. He can do the stair treads, all of that welding work. He can install the pole fencing. He can remove the junipers. He can build us a retaining wall behind a unit that needs it. And so he's kind of a one-stop shopping place for us. And the reason you're not seeing a low and high range is he's really confident in the material cost and labor time cost for doing the stair treads at the stacked unit buildings. What he is not comfortable with is the 3 or 4 landings that have deteriorated. There is a fascia underneath those landings at the stacked unit buildings, and you have to tear those apart to see if there's structural issues. Plus, there would be cement pour. And so we just had to guess at the cost on that with him. And it could be above that range, but we're hoping that it's in the middle. As we walked the property with him and with a couple of other vendors, one of them said, you know, when someone falls, it's not going to matter if the drop from the wall was 3 feet or 2.5 feet. So we went ahead and asked Victor to give us a quote for any railing, any drop that had 2 feet or more. And there's 1,070 feet of that. The material cost for the handrail is not that expensive. The pole that the city uses, which is pressure treated and looks nice, that's about $50 for an 8-foot section for material cost. And so you can about plan on tripling the cost for installation. And so if we were to narrow it back to just doing a 3-foot drop, you probably wind up maybe cutting $10,000 off that bill. Where you could save potentially is you could, if you did the 2-foot drop, Ella, you have told us we don't have to necessarily replace the tops of those timber walls if they're protected by a fence. But we decided we would go ahead and probably want to do that because the appearance looks so bad. So there are 58 top timbers that have to be replaced on the retaining walls. So that's our big needs that we think we have right away. So if the travelers were to come out in April and look over our property, we would have those 2 concerns addressed um, completely. The next one is the trees with a 20-foot clearance. Davy Tree gave us a bid on that, and it's a lot. And in some cases, like the willow tree, if the good news is they don't have to bring in a crane, but if they're going to be up there trimming the top of the tree, that tree has not had a major trim in years. They might as well do the whole of the tree, and that was true for several other trees on the property. The Cheyenne privet is terrible. It's going to take a crew of 5 to 6 people working 4 to 5 days on that hedge, and that's about what FLM took back in 2020 to clean up the hedge. It's a significant cost. And then we have several large ash, I think they're all ash stumps that need to be removed. One has to be removed to get in the backhoe to do concrete work on a porch, but they look bad. And then we see a vegetation in a number of areas that Robert Fulcomer interestingly did not see, but I think that's because he was walking the property in a day and it's hard to see everything. But there's definitely some vegetation that needs to be cut back and removed. So there you go. Concrete. We're feeling pretty good about this bid, and this is for a number of driveways that need attention, lots of sidewalk, crack filler, and then not related to concrete is the edging that is torn and needs to be replaced. The foundation for building G is structural, and that is put in a different category. But there will be concrete work for building G to deal with the porch. It is an insurance issue because the slope on that front porch is greater than 2%, and it's going to take a helical piering to raise it. So it's going to be really complex, but surprisingly, there's not a great deal of expense in that. We think that building G can be fixed for under $10,000, the porch and the sidewalk. And I just have to say again to Shirley, who's the owner at G31, how sorry I am that she has endured that situation at her front door for so long. So Susan has a question. Top timbers on retaining walls not enough, plus perpendicular timbers going into slopes are rotten. Well, we've had several people look at it, and we'll probably may need, as we get into this, to consult with a structural engineer. But the folks that are experts in this kind of work have said that while we have issues with the top timbers, they don't feel like we need to do structural repairs on the retaining walls themselves at this time. But having said that, we reserve the right to have a structural engineer come out and look at it, but that's what we're hearing as of now. So on to page 2, and your probably eyes have already got to the bottom. We're bringing the subtotal over from page 1 of 160 to 185,000, and our first one we do not have bids on. We have water and moisture and possibly microbial growth in 2 of our buildings, E and K, and concern for microbial growth under the foundation of G. Unfortunately, the company that did that testing did not take samples of the growth, the mold-like looking substances that they did have for lab testing. And then they also put a bid in for doing the work, and apparently that's a real contrary to appropriate ethical standards for companies that do testing, is you don't also do the work. So we are getting a proposal this week from WeCycle Environmental. They come highly recommended from Scott Home Inspection for coming out and doing air quality testing. They are recommending testing in both units, not just the unit that reported the water problem, and they will take lab tests on those growths. So we are wildly guessing as to what this is going to cost. We think we're probably going to have water back on to fully understand where the water is coming from for those buildings. whether it's ground table rising or whether it's excessive runoff and not appropriate drainage. And then we know we have a cracked foundation on the exterior on one of the buildings. Another foundation crack that's been sealed from the inside, but not the outside. A lot of work's been done without knowing where the cause is. So admittedly, our 60 to 80,000 range there is a very significant guess. Unfortunately, we probably won't know until later in the year. But of course, if the air quality testing fails, that would be something we would have to grapple with immediately. The next area is the value restoration. And what's interesting here is there's not a big spend. The pavement cracking, crack sealing, and paint stripping, paint restriping is not that expensive. The drainage for fixing three of our 10 of our, we're assuming there's about 10 garages that have water flowing back into them at the stacked unit buildings of A, B. I think that's primarily at C and A and B. I'm not hearing from owners at D that they were having water backflow, but anyway, we got a bid for 10, and that's a pretty firm bid at 7,000. But we went ahead and put the high range in case that 10 is woefully wrong and the number is more than that. And the mailbox pedestals that look terrible, not much expense there at all to fix. We know there are some other issues around the property. We have a patio wall at Z57 that's been terrible for years that we need to take care of. And so we put in some money to do that. So what we wind up with is a range of 247,000 to 308,000. The midpoint between those two is 278,000. And what I'm going to drag across now to the screen is an Excel spreadsheet for us to play what if. So one of the owners that has been working with us said, okay, let's go for that 278,000, the midpoint. Let's have 100,000 that we would spend from reserves and not replenish right away. And let's do a special assessment for the remainder. And that's what this would look like. So for my unit, which is down here in row 045, I would need to have a special assessment of $2,759. And I think, as we've talked with some owners, the sense is that that would not be due until 2026. And so folks could do some planning for it until then. Another question we got was, what if we don't do a special assessment? Or the special assessment is voted down? What will the board do then? So again, let's assume that we spend $100,000 of our reserves, and that we need to do a surcharge of dues for the next 3 years, and that the operating budget for 2026 is going to increase by 8%. So if we do that, then my unit, again, I have 1,348 square feet. My dues would go from $495.51 a month in 2025 to $611.79. The base is of the HOA budget at 8% is going to 495, 535, 15, and replenishing reserves would be at 76.64. So we'd still spend the 278,000 out of our existing reserves as best we can, and we would begin a plan for replenishing those over the next 3 years. So we can unmute if folks want to talk this through. So if you would put in the comment that you'd like to be unmuted and talk, or you can type if you would like to talk about options for what we do. Not seeing anyone raising their hand to or wanting to just lost my Excel spreadsheet, put that back. C amount if nothing is taken from the reserve. If we just do a special assessment. And I can zoom in here a little bit. I'm not sure. I hope this is big enough for people to see. But my unit 045 would have a special assessment of $4,309. Again, the assumption is we can fund most of these repairs with our surplus we have in our operating budget and our existing reserves that we have right now. But I think personally this is good news that while we have a very large expenditure, and gulp, that's not going to be easy for me to take, but $4,309 if I have some time to prepare for it, we can handle that. Ella, I think this is a question for you. I'm going to have to, I think, go back and do this unmute thing.
Great question, Keith. Will Colorado follow Florida and mandating reserves be kept up? Yes, the board and I did speak about this. This has been an ongoing trend across the United States. Whenever I shop at the HOA's insurance policy, one of the requirements that the insurance carriers want to see is an HOA's financials. And why are they looking at financials? They want to know how well funded your association is. The stronger funding an association has shows that they can handle smaller claims and that they usually are collecting the appropriate money for deferred maintenance. Our smaller associations that struggle with having strong reserves, what we will find is insurance carriers will automatically decline offering them an insurance bid because they're not funded well enough in their reserves. So excellent question.
You've got a follow-up question that Doug, you've been researching, and I think Linda Hansen has been researching. The question is, what risk do we have with lenders like VA and FHA if we deplete our reserves?
What I found out from talking to some mortgage brokers is that there was no actual dollar amount that they would say was needed in reserves because each lender had different standards. VA, FHA, Fannie Mae, all of those were different. What they did look at was how much was budgeted each year towards reserves. So they wanted to see 10% of the operating budget going into reserves, but they weren't necessarily that concerned about the dollar amount in reserves. Equal to that, though, they were becoming more and more concerned about the appearance of the HOA in terms of whether they would write a mortgage or not for it.
Linda Hansen's also been looking at this, so I'm going to unmute Linda and ask her to speak to this.
Hi, everybody. I would just like to say quickly, I did actually contact a mortgage lender here in Fort Collins today over here on JFK. He told me that he would check into providing some information to Stephen and I regarding FHA and or VA financing. I told him that we certainly did not want to do anything to jeopardize any future homeowners from not being able to get mortgages if they wanted to purchase in Peachtree. And so he's going to provide that information to me, hopefully within the next day or two. So I don't have much information on that other than he said he knew one of the things that they look at for sure is like what percentage of the homeowners are delinquent on their dues and Um, he was also going to check and see. I gave him my particular address to make sure that we are, I guess we have to pay, like, I don't know, Stephen, maybe you know, every so many years we have to pay to keep our FHA and VA financing status. And so he was going to check to make sure that that we um, that has been paid in the last few years, so that people can even get FHA and VA financing. So anyway, to cut it short, he is going to provide some information, of which I will share that with Stephen as soon as I get it. But definitely, I think all of us are very concerned. We don't want to jeopardize anybody from not being able to get the financing they need to purchase here. So that's all I have to say. I just called as a concerned homeowner, which I care about this property deeply. I've lived here 25 years of my life. So
Thank you.
that's it.
So there was a question, is there a way to separate the apartments from the townhouses? Seems like there is a large amount of funds going to the apartments. Well, first of all, I would say they're not apartments. They are residences, and uh, uh, so they are homes, just like my home is. No different. Second, I don't think that's true. I think most of our large expenses that, like the foundations we're dealing with, are not in buildings A, B, C, D, and M. They are in the paired unit buildings.
Yep.
And our water lines that we've had to grapple with and other major repair problems, uh, and our vegetation that we have to take care of, and our trees. I would say if anybody's subsidizing anybody, and this is just me, I'm not putting any pencil to this. I would say the folks in the buildings A, B, C, D, and M are probably subsidizing the paired unit buildings. But most important, this idea that we can buy insurance by building, or that we can somehow restructure our HOA. I asked our attorney at Altitude Law, Amanda Ashley, if there was anything to that, and she said, "Oh my gosh, where to begin?" Was her answer. How would you divide the street, for example, and who's responsible for that? And it would require a complete dissolution of our association and restructuring it back. And that's to do that, you would have to have the approval of all of the lenders. They get a vote. And when we change our covenants and bylaws, it is chasing a gray cat in a dark room that doesn't exist. So, to be blunt. We have another question that since it's a town hall, and nothing's off limits. Question is, what's our relationship with CCG like today? And I want to say I am pretty cautiously optimistic. They are working really hard to, I think, improve their services, and so I'm cautiously optimistic. Doug, do you have any? You're not so cautiously optimistic.
I'm not going to say exactly what I think at the top of my head. They're working very hard. And they have a lot to work on. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. So I guess we are striving to make things work. I do know that the turnover in the HOA management business is phenomenal. The average property manager lasts less than 2 years, and it's very hard work, and the compensation is not that great. And so there's lots of reasons why we have a lot of challenges with vendors in the property management world. But in short, we need to do a lot of times we need to do their job for them to work and function well. And at this juncture, I would say CCG is being supportive of helping us to best serve our owners. Well, we have been at this an hour, and I just again want to thank Ella for joining us. And obviously, this will be something that we will continue to learn more as we move forward. And remind everybody that the board meeting is in person. Um, that we hope you all can attend. Uh, do have a question for you, Ella. If you're still with us, can Ella confirm that all these issues have to be addressed this year?
I wish I had a crystal ball to help with that. Here's what I can do. As long as the majority of these issues are addressed immediately and you guys have plans, preparations, signed contracts to address them after the renewal. So the renewal again is in May. I know that I have confidence that I can communicate that with travelers to be able to negotiate a renewal. If we walk into this renewal and Travelers does a drone flyover or a physical inspection, and they come back with a laundry list of things, Travelers usually says this needs to be done before the renewal or there's no renewal offer. So it would be nice to be able to confidently back the association, have those negotiations if and when that topic is brought up by Travelers.
And I guess what I would say is a big portion of this midpoint of 278,000 is not insurance related. It is long overdue care for our property. And we know there have been two sales that took a hit with the value of what they had for a sale price this last year, maybe more. And we know that it's just the wrong thing to let someone go any longer than necessary with an unsafe condition of their building. And so I just don't see this as being something that, as we said at the very beginning, that Doug said at the very beginning, is something we can prioritize to do over the next 3 to 5 years. I think our time for prioritizing is over. It's now time for action.
I would add one thing. There are very few things that get cheaper the longer you put them off.
Yep.
And that's something to consider.
So what are the next steps? We will propose a motion, I believe, on Wednesday for not renewing the certificates of deposit that renew in the first one February 2nd, I want to say, and then there's 2 in May, that we will not renew those certificates of deposits and transfer the funds to the reserve account. We will have the environmental assessment done for the 3 buildings. I'm hoping that we can get that scheduled this coming week. The firm bids. I think we would start a bidding process, and we've got some thoughts about how we work with vendors that are different than what we have historically done. I think, frankly, we have paid a price in skipping around arborists, and we've paid a price in skipping around with our painting vendor. But in any case, we need to do some bid work and find out schedules and that kind of thing. And so some major RFP process will be unfolding fairly soon. And can we provide the slides? Absolutely. We will make them available in a follow-up email to the community with a link to the video recording that we'll hope to have up on YouTube in the morning. When we send that email out to all owners, we'll provide a link to the PDF copy of the slides. Well, thank you everyone again for joining us this evening. We know you had a lot of choices in what you could do with your time this evening, and this is probably not the most fun, but we're actually feeling pretty good about the future of Peachtree, and look forward to working with the owners to consider how we go about improving our situation and securing the financial condition of our HOA. With that, we're going to say good evening and thanks again for joining us.